Okay. We are live. Okay.
Should we wear our masks while we're?
Is it,
Okay.
that's our idea. Can I take mine off to read this? And maybe when people, I mean, there's so few people in here. And is everybody vaccinated? Everyone in here is vaccinated. What do you think?
And myself.
We'll throw the booster as we speak.
Yeah, okay. Okay, all right, fair enough, okay. All right. Well, welcome to you online. There's a couple of people in the audience in this room, which I'm very grateful for, but of course, we all understand this is a very challenging time. So to those of you who have come, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to this discussion today. My name is Anna Gersh, and I am the founder of the One Love Symposium, and this is phase 2 of a 3-phase data collection around developing a certification for the human services professional. This project started over 1.5 years ago. Being at home with my son and watching the events of the past nearly 2 years unfold inspired action for me. Especially during such a challenging time for education, I wanted to demonstrate to my 15-year-old son that people have the power and the obligation to work hard for what they believe in. In some ways, the work of this symposium started back in 2018 when I was on the task force to create a police oversight commission, and possibly earlier than that when I was a classroom teacher. I've been thinking about the point of service for a long time. It's an understudied part of human service and one that needs to be further and much more intentionally examined. It's important because there are so many moments when we come into contact with human services professionals. Every job that empowers one person to make decisions for or about another person is a human services profession. Human services professionals are gatekeepers. They decide if you are to be given the resources you desire, whether it will be more or less difficult to obtain those resources, or if you'll be denied, as in a bank loan officer, or a human services professional, or a school counselor. Human services professionals determine rewards and punishment, as in a teacher or a police officer. And of course, they make these determinations based on many factors, but critical among these is information gleaned at the point of service moment. And this is the place where a lot of mistakes are made. Because of this, focusing on this moment has the potential to do a lot of good. When you think about the many influences that drive human decision-making, from learned behaviors like biases to emotional mood and physical state, it's easy to see how mistakes happen. But when these mistakes have the power to change people's lives forever, as in a decision to suspend a student for the first time, to choose a certain course of medical treatment, or to draw a gun, it becomes clear that there's more to consider and potentially improve than what we're currently doing. The point of service moment is a moment of assessment. The professional vested with decision-making power is making assessments throughout the moments of human interface. Consider the car dealer. If you've ever bought a car, you understand that the salesperson has wide discretion in the price that is eventually offered. There are many variables that play into that figure, but what they believe they can get you to pay is as important as anything else. This determination is made during your meeting. The dealer is assessing your manner, your appearance, your language, and these are considerations in the initial offer. The same is true in much more high-stakes circumstances. This project aims to expand knowledge around the point of service moment, but the thing that makes this work different than other types of professional knowledge development is that it is possible to glean that knowledge from a wide variety of people. because the point of service moment is a moment literally everyone on earth can claim to be an expert on. This knowledge can be community sourced. This project is all about gathering information on the point of service moment from a wide variety of people, including, so far, young people, their families and chosen communities, experts, and artists. Today is about looking at what we discovered in the first phase of this three-phase data gathering process, which started with young people in their communities, and then bringing that to the second phase of this data gathering process, which is today, where we bring the information before experts and ask them to help us shape what we learned. The third data gathering phase will happen in February, where we consider this information in light of what should be the philosophical underpinnings of this work. Specifically, what do we all have in common? Our universal human values, those priorities that drive us to act, regardless of who we are. This phase will enlist the thinking of artists as well as experts in areas including media, philosophy, and politics to further develop our understanding of the complex web of information that influences decision-making at the point of service. I'd like to welcome Dr. Michael Johnson, our moderator and department head and chair of public policy and public affairs at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Dr. Johnson is an engineer by trade and brings deep expertise in community-based operations research. Specifically relevant for today is his expertise in conducting conversations for values-focused decision-making. I'd also like to welcome our panelists. Dr. Wendy Burke is department head of teacher education at Eastern Michigan University. Dr. Burke has been a professor in curriculum and instruction in the Department of Teacher Education since 2000 and serves on the Learning Forward Michigan Board. She's also co-founded the Washtenaw Intermediate School District's Adaptive Leadership Network and is a founding member of the Michigan Social Emotional Learning Alliance. Rebecca Guzman has been a community health trainer with Detroit Health Department since 2017. She was previously the training coordinator for the Detroit Healthy Start Project. She is a founding member of the Michigan Community Health Worker Alliance and holds a seat on the National Healthy Start Association Community Health Worker Advisory Board. Rebecca is a master trainer for the MISHWA CHW, Michigan Community Health Worker Alliance Community Health Worker Training, and serves as a field instructor for students in social work and public health. Finally, Brandon Tucker is a nationally certified workforce development professional and serves as the Associate Vice President of Workforce and Community Development at Washtenaw Community College. In this position, he oversees WCC's, Washtenaw Community College's Police Academy, the first in the United States to achieve accreditation and the first in the world to receive an award of excellence from the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training. To begin, I'd like to share a short film, about 5 minutes, to give you a sense of the youth data collectors who worked on this project. We'll share a bit of information from the survey, and then Dr. Johnson will take over. This program is certified to offer sketch and CEUs, that's teacher and social worker continuing education credits. If you'd like to take advantage of that, please be sure and sign in on the pad of paper at the door. Okay, with that, let's have a peek at the film. Going to go. All right, so what this is, you've had a little bit of background from your mom, but what basically is happening here is we are going to co-create a survey instrument. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, I'm Daryl Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Mentor to You. I am advocate for youth and our community.
Thank you very much. Corey, will you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Corey Daniels. Well, I am a member here. I also do lots of work around the community, and yeah, pleasure
Okay.
meeting y'all.
Oh, age and school.
Oh, I am 17 years old, school, Ipsy High.
Thank you very much. Jalen, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Jalen Wilson. I also go by Anime King and AK. I'm 15 and I go to Arbor Prep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I was talking to my auntie, right? And I did the I gave her the test, and she said to me, "Why should police officers, doctors, and teachers have to have empathy?" Because she was like, those type of jobs shouldn't have to require for you to take other people's problems to heart and stuff. You're required to do one thing, not make everything so personal. And I am in the neutral zone for that because I agree, but I also don't agree. And I came to an understanding in my head, maybe there's a certain level of empathy you're only supposed to go in that type of job. And then,
Effective leaders. And I think this is where we kind of split the hairs is cognitive empathy is the ability to understand another's perspective. Emotional empathy is the ability to physically feel what another person feels. And empathetic concern is the ability to sense what another needs from you. And so it's like, I think that like, I'm thinking about the police and some of these killings, right? That policeman, I don't want him as a policeman out here to physically feel what I feel, because you're right, it's going to cloud his judgment. I need him to stay objective. But I do want him to be able to have the ability to understand my perspective.
Way to use both. Yeah. That was good. That was good. Okay. So are we in agreement then that these are separate?
Yeah.
That we want to keep them both? Okay.
But probably what I will say is that I feel like listening skills are important. I think we should see how, I don't think we should definitively put them on the list quite yet, just to see which other ones we come up with, because I think listening skills are important, but depending on what else we come up with, I don't know quite yet if I would consider them to be in like the top 8.
Right, going clockwise, I guess.
All right, hold on. Elvin is taking over the meeting, and I wanna give Louisa a chance to start, because she's got a new one. All right, so I'm gonna put her back on speakerphone.
All right, we're going clockwise.
I thought you were Louisa all this time.
All right, Louisa, nice and loud.
Okay, should I introduce myself or?
Oh, that would be great.
Okay.
It's always nice to be put in the youth
hi,
category.
I'm Louisa, and I am a senior at Y-High. And yeah, my pronouns are she and her. And yeah.
All right, what are your ideas?
So we talked about how sometimes you can't really be objective in certain situations where there's injustice happening. So 2 additional skills kind of would be like allyship or solidarity.
Allyship and solidarity.
Can you elaborate on those? Because I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean.
Okay. All right. Oops, I should have prepared. So what you can see from that is we got together. We had 7 meetings. One of them was online. We met outside in Frog Island. I brought over the mobile classroom, and it was sort of the most central place for these kids. We had 2 from Ann Arbor, 4 from Ypsi, and they were sort of far flung across Ypsilanti. And not every one of them came to every meeting. You know, it was a lot easier to gather them in the summertime, and once school started, things got predictably more complicated once sports and everything else started. But I can say with conviction that every single one of them had a moment of great insight and offered a great deal to the project. Together, I gave them, as the content expert, 3 sort of general categories. Situational awareness, respect, what should this human services professional have respect for or be respectful of? And then skills, what types of skills should the human services professional do? And their contribution was having these conversations and coming up with the items, the answer choices for within each of those categories. We kept it very simple. Each of the items, there are only 3 substantive questions. What should a doctor, teacher, or a police officer be aware of in terms of situational awareness, and then also the same question format for respect and skills. And then once we put that together, we added some demographic questions so we could figure out who was being able to answer this survey. They gave this survey to their communities. And then when this program was being reported on, the guy that wrote about it for MLive actually included the survey in the article. So we had a few trickle in after that. It kind of changed the distribution. And so learning all the way down, all the way through the process. We ended up with 84 responses. As of yesterday, the most selected response for situational awareness was, well, let me share with you what the item choices that they came up with in these conversations, because that's where the meat of it was. So the question for situational awareness: what types or aspects of situational awareness does a doctor, teacher, police officer need to be good at their job, right? So the question, and this was what our conversations were like. It's not like, how do you become a good, a smart teacher or a competent police officer? The question was, what makes you good at that job? And so that was what all of our questions were about. And I wish I'd had more time with them. That's what I can say. But some of their answer choices for situational awareness were knowledge about people's backgrounds or circumstances, an open mind, the ability to pay attention, also good observation skills, curiosity, which interestingly was the least selected, curiosity, which I found fascinating. Empathy, in terms of being able to see another person's perspective, objectivity, the ability to be objective. So those were the answer choices for situational awareness. The most selected was the ability to pay attention or good observation skills. And then also to be objective, which I thought was very interesting, because a whole lot of our conversation was about empathy, but in the end, when pressed for clarity, they sort of lean toward the types of choices we would make when we're trying to be very specific and quantify what it is we want other people to learn and know. So in the interest of making sure that we are able to have a fruitful conversation, I'm just going to share with you that for respect, the most selected was in terms of what does a doctor, teacher, or police officer need to respect or have respect for to be good at their job. The golden rule, treating others as you would want to be treated. Least selected, but on the list, respect for the passion or concerns of people in the moment that you're dealing with. They're, which I thought was very interesting. You know, again, I mean, this is the nature of youth voice. It was a real dance to figure out how much do I, as a content expert, shape their answers. It was a matter of forming the survey and getting it out into the world and having them have that experience. So, you know, when we look at this data together, what does it mean to you? We had a few additional answers. Wanting teachers to be empathetic, we want them to respect culture. Culture, only one person said that, which I thought was interesting out of all the responses. Finally, the last question was skills. What skills does a doctor, teacher, police officer need to have to be good at their job? And the purpose of using these exemplar professions was so that if people didn't understand what a human services professional was, the kids were not obligated to have to explain it to them. So we use those three target professions to clarify. Number one selected item was patience. Least selected, the ability to be loving.
To be what?
Loving.
Loving.
Which I thought was
Interesting. What is interesting?
valuable. We had also a selection of other open-ended. We gave people an open-ended choice. A couple of those were, I just want to know how we can not just target the people that are over the human services professional, but the doctors, teachers, and police officers themselves as well. And one other, is there a process to screen out those who may be unfairly biased against particular groups? General demographics, about 35% of the respondents were 13 to 15 years old. About 63% were 13 to 18. 65% white, 15% black, and another 15 split pretty evenly across Hispanic and Asian respondents. The largest portion were in the 48103 and 4819798 zip codes. And then I'll just hand the mic over to Dr. Johnson. Thank you very much. People in the room should know there's about a 4-second delay.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Johnson, you are muted.
So it looks like the screen for downtown is muted as well. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for taking time to have a conversation with me. And I'd like to start with some questions that address our core identities. The first one is this, and thank you very much to the panelists for agreeing to be part of this conversation. I'd like to ask first how you characterize your identity as a professional, as distinct from your specific job description. So as distinct from I'm a cop or a teacher or a social worker. How would you characterize yourself? And any of the panelists welcome to answer in any order.
Well, I'll go first. Hopefully everybody can hear me online. I think I categorize myself first as a black male. So, I think oftentimes with all that we've seen in our country, I've realized more than ever that I have to bring my full self to my role. And beyond the almost PhD, for our PhDs in the room, write chapter 3 right now, pray for me. Beyond the education, beyond the title at the college and the president's cabinet, I'm a black male that is a professional and that has a daughter and a black son, 2.5 and 1.5. So I think for me, I look at myself and say, who am I? That's who I bring, is the black professional that happens to be male, that has 2 babies, and has a seat at the table by way of the position I hold.
Thank you very much. Would another one of the panelists like to follow?
Sure. My name is Rebecca Guzman, and I'm a social worker by training. But I think what I bring to the table is my identity as a member of the community that I live in, the community that I work in, and again, not what I look like, but who I am internally. And that is a caring person, someone who is looking to elevate the people that I interact with, and a promoter. And so by bringing my whole self in, who I am, a mother, grandmother, a resident of my community, is essential to how I identify as I work with the people that I work with.
Yeah, thank you. And Wendy, would you like to add your thoughts?
Oh, sure. So I identify with both of the ways that you presented yourselves. And I would say that I am very conscious of my commitments and my passion, but I recognize the way in which I'm read on a regular basis as a white, blue-eyed female who's in my 50s. I'll just leave it at that. I'm a mother, I'm a partner, and I am too committed to being fully present, to bring my whole self to each moment and to be with others as I go through this path of trying to figure out what it means to be fully human as I walk each day.
Thank you very much for sharing these thoughts. I have another question for you that gets to a core identity. And this relates to the people that you work with. How would you characterize the people that you serve on the job? Would you consider them as clients, as customers, as cases, as potential threats? Tell me a little bit about how you see the people that you serve.
I think it's twofold, because I think we at least in my institution, we serve customers that happen to be students or happen to be our corporate partners where we do training. But then I believe that as a leader, I serve my staff. As their leader, they're not just an employee, but they're really a partner in the work that we do, right? And I think that as we adapt kind of a servant mindset, it allows for you to approach things differently. That no, you're not just somebody that reports to me or a colleague that I work with, but you're a partner in the work that I do, right? Because I can't do it all by myself. You can't do it all by yourself. It takes us coming together. If we didn't learn that in COVID, we learned that more than ever, right? that we're partners in the work. So I think, and that, I am on the administrative side. I teach part-time, but I know from having been an academic dean, the word customers in higher education gets people all cringing, but I believe they are. Our students are customers, our community members are our customers, and the people that we work with are our partners.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
No, I have a little bit of a different perspective in that as a trainer, and that's been pretty much the majority of my work. I really look at myself as a mentor, as someone who is assisting the next generation of health and human service providers. And so really, we talk a lot about in the training initially about, how do we manage the power dynamic in our relationships? And what I like to do is model that in my relationship with them, so that they are the teacher and I am the student, and I am the student and they are, you know what I mean?
Reciprocal
I think
relationship,
reciprocal
yeah.
relationship. Because like you said, we can't do this alone. And if we want to grow, we have to grow together. And being able to be vulnerable with them allows them to be vulnerable with us. And also that trickles down to when they are actually working with the people, not the clients, not the consumers, but we like to frame it, or I like to frame it as the people that you serve, because then that really reverts back to the servant leadership,
Right.
as opposed to that power dynamic of I am the worker and you are the recipient. It is really much more the power dynamic shifts, and I am serving you.
And I completely see it in that way as well. And I understand the partnership idea, I think that you were sharing initially. But this idea that I am always thinking about my responsibility and all can hold me accountable to the way that we prepare educators in service to all youth. So it's both those that are in classrooms today and those who will be in classrooms tomorrow. And that's who we're going for, right? So it's all of us working together in service to the current and future generations.
Great, thank you very much for your responses. Anna, shall I go on to the next question?
We have a word for that in our realm. We call it parallel process. And when I say our realm, I'm actually looking at Wendy in education. The notion that the modeling is how we best show people how to behave in the world. And that's a really important aspect of this conversation around the human services professional, and bringing it back to that point of service moment. What do we want to see from people? It's most easily communicated in a teaching environment through modeling, and we call that parallel process. So thanks for bringing that up.
The other thing that I just came to mind in terms of that is, I always tell the students, or they're not students, they're adults who are enhancing their skills.
Learners.
They're learners, thank
Yeah.
you, adult learners. Because I really don't work much with teens. I think our training really is for adults. But, we talk about acting like the person we want to be, and then we will become that person. And that really resonates within our learning environment. And many come back and say that that's something that they carry on as they move forward into their work field.
Thanks. So I'd like to go on to the second question. And this regards a certain way of thinking about what you do, the first of two different lenses through which we view your work. So let's think about a service encounter that any of you may have with the people that you serve. In this service encounter, what would you say is an immediate goal of yours? What is one thing that you are specifically looking to achieve in the short amount of time that you have with the person you're working with? And we don't have to explain how you'll achieve your goal, or the specific action or tactics you'll engage in, but instead the thing that you'd like to achieve in the short term.
I think that if I put on my leader of the police academy hat, right? As we, at our police academy here in Washington County, most may or may not know, we train anywhere from 20 to 35 law enforcement professionals annually, but then about another 50 correctional professionals. But then we train about 750 current law enforcement professionals through in-service training, professional development. And one thing that, with all this been going on, we really looked at how can we bring home the content more in a way that is not just teaching in a classroom or a lecture, but being able to apply that. And one of the things that we've been teaching, around the application of the theory, and the question was about service encounters, is when we arrive on the scene to provide service, is there respect that is not just implied but felt? Is there the situation that's at hand addressed in the most effective way? Effective is subjective, but effective in a way that still is respectful. So trying to layer that service encounter. But then thirdly, if it happened all over again, would I do the same thing that I did? So approaching the situation, the calls for service, in a way that's modeled and able to be replicated in the future. So when I approach something, I'm doing it as this needs to be the best practice, it's to be the best way, so that whether it's a junior officer or somebody who's been in the game for 20 years, that we're doing it in a way that's replicable. So those are kind of the three things to think about that training hat, that we want to make sure that every time that we have it, we call them calls for service, that we do it in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Rebecca or Wendy, would either of you like to think a bit about what goal you would like to achieve in the short term, thinking about a particular or typical service encounter?
Sure. In the field of public health, there's a lot more subjectivity because it's a sharing health information. And so with the learners, when I have the learners, my goal is that, yes, I share some foundational information and skills that they can walk out the door and implement. But in the short amount of time that I have with them, my goal is for, my short-term goal is to instill the practice of self-reflection and practicing feeling their vulnerability, and so that they can relate to the people that they serve once they're gone. And although the foundational information is important because it is an introductory course, my goal is that they can continue gaining that information through in-services, through their employers. But with me, my goal is for them to touch into what's important, their values and their beliefs, because we know that that's what drives behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, thank you very much. Wendy, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to just take on, and I do this with absolute respect in a friendly way, but I'm going to problematize the use of the word training here as we work in human fields of service. And Anna knows I'm probably going to go in this direction. So training has some certain components to it, I think, that work well in all of our contexts, in the sense of moving towards what Brandon was describing as predictable patterns of interaction. And I would imagine we could use context in similar ways too, when you have a person who's providing some sort of service, reading a context and making wise decisions based on some really strong best practices, if you will, or most effective practices, But the word I might want to intersect here with this kind of thinking is more of around professional learning. And I think that's what we were talking about before, that the learning that I would advocate for here, whether it be in profession, in the police arena or in health profession or in education, would be more about becoming an adaptive, fluid thinker. And again, that critical thinking I really resonated with, that you come into a context, you're able to see the nuances of that context. You pull up a repertoire of action after you've assessed and you've done a scanning, right? And this happens in the classroom too. So if I have an encounter with a student, and I can imagine a student who may be having a rough day, I need to read that situation, and I do it with all the heart that I have, but an awareness that requires both a social awareness, situational awareness, but the capacity for me to understand I'm also a player in this context. So I need to get myself with my own, head on, right? I need to say, am I going to escalate this moment? Am I going to de-escalate it? Am I going to add to it? Or am I going to, take away from? So there's so much potential in every moment of interaction. And I think that happens every day in every classroom I know of. We have the capacity to lift people up, to be there, to be fully present, and to support them in the learning process. Or if we have a full capacity to shut it down, get them removed from that classroom, or completely alienated from the whole learning and teaching process. So I guess where I'm going to lean on is the idea that my job, and I take this to heart, the goal is to have every adult who's providing support for any youth to be actively conscious that we're all engaged in a human endeavor that requires learning. And that means learning in that moment. And you're going to keep working on that repertoire.
I want to respond to that because I think this really interesting sort of piece of this conversation here. I want to go back to what Brandon was saying about skills that are replicable. I think we're getting into a piece of this point of service moment across these different professions that is kind of like the nut of why we need to study this more deeply. Because there are certain jobs where consistency and replicability and consistency of interaction is really the prime directive. Because, I think you can make that argument about the police. We want to know more than anything that we're going to get the same treatment for the same experience. Teaching is different. The teaching environment is supposed to be more responsive. And so I'm not sure what I'm not coming in here with an answer or anything, but I do think that this is one of these notes, these pieces of this human services professional potential certification, that there is something that is absolutely universal about that can be studied and developed in that point of service moment. But there is an argument to be made for both of these things that you're making out right now, that and there are a lot of kids that would want the same thing and that have been mistreated by teachers and would prefer consistency over sensitivity. And I've actually, in professional development, I've seen that across how teacher managers deal with their staff, because I work in after school, and so we have site coordinators and they have a group of staff. And in surveys that I've done of that population, those staff crave consistent treatment. It's a real inclination in some jobs to sort of let personal relationships make the job environment better, but if you're not part of that in crowd, then you don't get treated as well. So there's a lot to unpack here, and thank you all for bringing it up, and this why we met today. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
That's a great challenge. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. So I'd like to ask another question related to your immediate encounter. This has to do with what you do in the encounter. So you've articulated goals, short-term goals that you'd like to achieve during your encounter, and some of you have articulated even broader, more fundamental goals. But think of your service encounter. Can you describe 2 actions that you take or would consider taking to help achieve this immediate goal that you've articulated? And they may not be actions that you routinely take. So I'd like you, if you could consider one thing that you do routinely that aligns with the goals that you've set for yourself. And if you could, consider one action that you don't routinely take, but which you would like to in order to better achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. Does that make sense?
I think the first that we've done, and for context, even in my role now, I still have leadership for our public service training area. And I've had now that leadership responsibility for 7 years. So I've seen the ebbs and flows of what has happened in our community, what's happened in our country. One thing that we've done in the last 5 years is we've invested probably a little over about $550,000 in equipment that allows for testing of knowledge related to calls for service. So we have a Milo machine that's hidden in one of our academic buildings that is a shoot, don't shoot system. Not owned by us, owned by, thank the Lord for the Sheriff's Department, Ann Arbor, PD, and U of M. They bought it because it's about $250,000. But it's a highly interactive system that we've scanned Eastern Michigan's campus and Washtenaws campus video, and we are able to simulate that we have a LGBT QA student who is transitioning, who has gotten into a fight in a classroom, given real life examples. How do you deal with that situation where you got one person against another because of their own decisions and their choices? And now I've been called there, how do I de-escalate that? If I come in there and I have my own bias and I say, well, I'm gonna, it gets real deep. It goes down to calling, using the right pronouns. But if I don't use the right pronouns, now I've set off a trigger, and now I'm not seen as a trusted partner in that moment. So literally, that's one of the scenarios. So we have invested in systems to be able to train that, and in everything that we now do, that we teach in the classroom is now replicated with a scenario. So it's no longer that we're just the experts and we come in and we teach. No, okay, show me what you would do in this scenario at 2 o'clock in the morning. This is another one, and you're tired and you've been there all day. So that's one thing we've done that has been highly successful. There's 20 regional academies in the state of Michigan. We're the only one with that. So that was a game changer for us. What we have not done, and I think is an opportunity, is, and we have to be real careful, just like thinking about my research mind from an IRB perspective. When we're dealing with human subjects, we want to ensure that we're protecting them. So I say this and laying the foundation, we got to protect them. But looking at how can we bring more real life scenarios into the equation with individuals, not necessarily with practice, but they can come in and really demonstrate or talk through. And we've kind of done this where we have a family now that has been part of law enforcement because we know officers are stressed out. So we have a real life family that comes in and talks about how they manage that stress. They've been in the game for 20 years. How does the wife deal with the husband that's gone or bringing home some of those issues? So that has been kind of a safe, I think, case of bringing someone in. But I think we can, an opportunity for us would be to look at how can we bring more real life people to come in to share, to help inspire, and I think level set people's approach to how they're going to move in the field of law enforcement.
Yeah,
Very long answer. I apologize for that.
no, thank you very much,
I'm a
Brandon.
preacher too, so sometimes I go on.
Well, I thank you very much. I'd like to turn to Rebecca and, conscious of the time, I want to ask if you might focus on, again, the encounter, the service encounter, and, thinking of the goals that are important to you that you'd like to achieve during that encounter. Is there a particular action or activity that you would like to perform, but perhaps you don't do it routinely or find it difficult to perform?
There is one activity that I do, and that's when we, because I said that one of my goals is for people to really get in touch with, who they really are, because that's a person that others see. And so to be authentic. And one of the things is the activities that I don't always have the time to do or the opportunity to do, but I know that it's effective. And that is, on the first day, say, as you look at me, what do you see? Who do you see? And, I get the whole range of you were born with a silver spoon, or, you were this or you were that based on the way that you speak, the way that you look, et cetera, et cetera. And then I like to show a picture of myself, when I was 6, running barefoot through the hills of Puerto Rico with my hair wild, barefoot, and running with the pigs, right? And they're like, that can't be you. And that is how I really present my vulnerability and my authenticity and how I connect with folks and say, this is who I am. This is a part of me. What you see is only a part of who I am. And so when you interact with me, you're also interacting with that little girl that you see running up the hills.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate you sharing that. Anna, I'd like to turn it back to you since we're getting close to the hour.
Okay, well, we have, actually, we are okay to go through till 1 o'clock. So we will have time for your questions if we want to do that. And I just want to let you guys know that there are 9 people watching. So even though the room is bare, there are people that are learning from this exchange. I keep hearing these sort of, the notion of the human services professional, that it can span these, all these different professions, and that it is equally an applicable potential certification to the police officer as it is for the community health worker. But yet I keep hearing some kind of very predictable dichotomies in this kind of conversation. I hear Brandon talking about things that don't surprise me, but that are very important and that don't seem to be as high on the priority as for Rebecca or for Wendy in these conversations. And that is specifically consistency, replicability, training programs that support and create predictable responses. What I'm kind of hearing from both Wendy and Rebecca is that predictable responses are rare, really, when you are talking about human beings. So I guess my sort of wondering at this point is, where is the intersection that you see? Is this possible? I mean, like, is this a possible certification? Something that zeroes in on the point of service moment, that the point of service moment is equally important for the police officer to think about as it is for the elder care worker or the school teacher or the bank loan officer. It is my absolute conviction that when we think about that just piece of that interaction, that there are some things that everybody has to think about equally. And so I would ask the panel if there are any things that you can think of that are truly universal across these professions, concerning only that point of service moment. And, you know, if any of the 3 human beings in this audience who are not actually working the technical aspect, or anybody online would like to weigh in on this, we'd love to hear that too. But is there anything that you can think of that is universally true across these professions?
I have a thought. And I think it's really based, one universal aspect, I think, is safety. All of the teachers, the health and human service workers, the police officers are concerned about their safety. Now, they view it differently, but I think that that's an intersecting point where, you know, community health workers might be concerned about what's going to happen if I'm going door to door, you know. Whereas a police officer, I would assume, is concerned about what's behind that door. And the teacher is concerned about their students in the classroom or their safety when they have to face a parent who may not want to hear what they have to say. So I think that that's an intersection that is universal whenever we have to interface with another person, especially in a professional capacity. That's one thought.
I'm going to add to that, and it's a buzzword. I hate to use buzzwords or references because we've all heard it, so wait for it. Implicit bias, I think, is an intersection. And I think that it's got to be more than we did this 2-hour on Moodle or Blackboard because the school said we had to do it. And I think that in all of our professions, we have to be able to manage our own bias, because if we don't, we see what happens. You know, I'm the product of I love teachers, and have a whole family of them. Mother is a teacher. But I'm the product of going to a mostly white Catholic elementary school for 1 year, in which I was told by the teacher, whose name I just recalled the other day, get away from my desk. And then failed 6th grade because of this bad experience. And keep in mind, went to another school and was the #1 student of the district for character and got straight A's. But also the product of going to a mostly white high school, Catholic, in Toledo, where I was told by the high school counselor, you really shouldn't pursue college, Brandon, because you're going to only do something good with your hands.
And I think speaks to the predictability of the current system.
Yeah.
I could predict that for you. You could tell me just a couple factors and I probably could lay that out, that was your experience.
Yep.
Right? And that's what we want to disrupt here.
Absolutely.
Right,
But
so-
those two people had a bias towards black men
Right.
or black boys. And I don't know why, you know.
Well, and it's reinforced though through the whole structure of the school environment too.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's how we think about the relationships between youth and adults in schools and in classrooms. And I think that's where I would feel there would be some human or universal value here, that we have to put our humanity at the forefront of how we interact with others. And that's the game changer here. Right?
I agree with that.
Right?
I agree. It's who are you to that other person? And then who is that other person that you're having that exchange with? Because then you can move on to deal with some of the other issues if we can connect on that human level.
I agree.
So let me ask you then, you know, implicit bias, and this is, you know, one of the benefits I imagine that the human services professional certification does for people is that it approaches these sorts of known problems in people's psyches in a way that, rather than saying, look, we know you've got a problem with Black people, so we're going to try and fix that. And in education, we call that the deficit model. And one of the things that this certification hopes to offer people is an opportunity to allow people to become expert assessors of human intention, behavior, and circumstances, unencumbered by their biases. So I wonder do you think that's possible? Do you think it's possible to approach people from a condition that gives them a goal of being able to be the best assessor of human intention, behavior, and circumstances they can be, without starting from a deficit model? Like if this actually happened, that people could walk into a classroom to take their 30-hour certification in human services professional behavior, and we wouldn't have to start with the very first question being, or the very first exercise being, we're going to dismantle these problems that we know that you have. Is there a way to address this in a way that doesn't start with a deficit model?
I would say yes. I would say yes, because that's the approach that I take. You are where you're at, but where is it that you want to be? And it's based on personal choice. If where you are is where you want to be and you want to stay there, I can share information with you. But if you choose not to engage with that information, that's your choice. That's your choice. Will I give you a recommendation? Maybe not. But if you're good at sharing that information, I could say, yeah, this person will do well doing, in this entry level position. But if somebody is in the professional learning environment, I love that. I'm going to use that, run with it. And they really integrate and begin to question and ask themselves, I might be comfortable where I am, but I want to get to this other level, and take that information and really kind of massage it and work with it. Then the benefit is not only personally, but by the action of integrating that information, they then begin to react and act in a way that promotes them higher up in their to achieve their professional goals. So I think working from not a deficit approach, but from a strength-based approach, and emphasizing choice, because we can't make people learn. We can't make people change. And I think we all know that. And some people want to be mediocre. And, that's not my choice. But it is some people's choice. And I think if we're going to honor the people that we work with and the people that they serve, then we have to honor that in the people that sit before us.
And I think that you said something that struck me in this choice. I think for this, and I think there could be a training. I think there could be a certification here that could benefit all of our three and more. But I think it's going to have to be something that is elective and or encouraged, because you know how people approach training that's mandatory. It's I went back to the Blackboard training, the 40 hours that we have to do every year. People sit through that and it's like, oh God, here we go again. Then they print off the answers to the questions because they did it the last year. I mean, this is what happens when,
That's smarter than me.
you know, it happens. So we have to, it would have to be something that people want it,
Yeah.
or it's because I, as a leader, encourage that we should be doing it, that people follow it.
Yeah.
Because I think that sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know to want something they never knew they could have. So sometimes it does take encouragement from leaders or from colleagues. So I think it could be either or, but I think one strand, it cannot be something that's mandatory.
I keep wondering if, cutting across all of our professions, if we think about it as I guess it's a hopeful place of elevating the profession that's rooted in community service. So where individuals can aspire for something else and something different and something more is when they see connection to a much larger mission. Maybe it's a coalition. Maybe it's all of us saying, hey, if we all work together in these different sectors towards a common aim, just think what we could do in our communities. So I don't have this educator out there feeling like they're being asked to solve poverty, which happens on a regular basis, especially right now, right? That they personally take that on, that is the reason they're in that classroom. And I say, okay, you can help feed that child in your room. And in that way, you are taking on poverty. But what if you were to feel your connection to the other professions, and we all are addressing poverty as a root cause of systemic racism, as a root cause of inequity that's happening in all corridors of our community. And I think in that way, we could work to establish like a commitment, and then maybe it's a common code of ethics, if you will, to our humanity, to one another, with one another. What would that look and sound like?
And through that coalition work, that is how the Community Health Worker Alliance was established, and how this curriculum that we use came about. It was really based on identifying what all community health workers were doing, not only here in Michigan, but throughout the country. And what were those common core competencies that people felt that they were putting their efforts into? And that's how the curriculum was built. And we use popular education to really focus on the strengths of the adults and recognizing their expertise. And so it sounds a lot like what you're saying, but, bringing all the common threads and having shared conversation, because we've been talking about this community health worker training or certification for as long as I've been training folks, which goes back to the 1980s. And yet this certification didn't happen until just 2 or 3 years ago. But it was when we brought other people to the table and really started talking about what we have in common and how we can elevate the profession that we really were able to pick up some speed and create what we have in existence today.
Oh, that is a.
All right. Okay.
Dr. Johnson has one more question he'd like to present to you guys. I just want to thank you all so much. This has been a fascinating, elevating, instructive conversation for me. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your time and for your thoughts. So this discussion this past few minutes has been at a really high level. I'd like to focus on something a little more prosaic and practical, I suppose. So we have talked about the values that or goals that are important to you in a particular encounter. And we've had some opportunity to think about the actions that you do pursue or would wish to pursue in order to achieve these goals. So I'd like to turn now to the results of these of the actions that you take during the service encounter. We're familiar with the distinctions between outputs, these procedural or administrative measures of things that are done, and outcomes or changes in the lives of communities or individuals that are affected by the encounter. Would any of you be willing to name an output that you would believe is associated with one of your service encounters and contrast that with an outcome, even if the outcome is hard to achieve? And if you have any ideas on how to measure either of those, that would be useful to hear as well.
Can you distinguish those again for me?
Sure. So I'll speak as a teacher. So in the classroom, I want my students to achieve some basic skills in statistics and data analysis. That is something that I would call an output, because you could measure that through completing assignments or a test. But what I really want for them is to be educated data consumers and to know how to tell stories with data that can empower communities. So that kind of output is really desirable. It's not quite clear how I would measure it, but it's something that's important to me. Does that help?
Thank you.
So I serve on the 21st Century Policing Commission, and I'm the co-chair of one of our pillars, and it's commissioned by the sheriff, Sheriff Clayton, to really adopt President Obama's 2015 reform plan regarding policing. And I happen to have one of the pillars, which is trust and legitimacy. So how can we create trust and legitimacy with police in the community? I told Sheriff Clayton we'll get him later for giving me that one. But I think that when I think about an output for our future law enforcement professionals, it is that each professional would be seen as trustworthy, and that the system would be seen as legitimate in the community. That's locally here, right? Because if we try to nationally, that's a whole other scale and scope. But here in Washtenaw County, that would be the goal, that when people interact and see law enforcement professionals, that they see them as trustworthy, and that it is the system is seen as legitimate within the community.
Great, thank you. Rebecca or Wendy, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
So I would see as an output, and I'm thinking just specifically about those that we're helping to prepare for classrooms, is that all graduates of our program have the capacity to establish caring, meaningful relationships with all youth in their care. And that's actually not lofty. That's the legitimate output. Now the dream comes, the outcome is that these relationships then serve as the cornerstone for how those educators continue on to create their practice in the context with others. So it's not, in the past, I think I spoke a language of, I want to ensure you're all leaving us as change agents. And then I recognized, oh my goodness, and that was after some years, what am I doing? Help me, because I realized in that single moment of that way of speaking, I'm not thinking about these primarily younger people, going out into well-established structured systems, and they're fired up. And they enter into the system and they may or may not fit in. They may not find the allies and the support that they need. So again, I've learned a lot through the years, and I recognize that all of this capacity is a dynamic one, but it's one that we hope that is internalized, and thinking about it in a network approach to instilling that as a practice among many. That's a big outcome.
Thanks a lot. And Rebecca, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Really, my goal is for people to go into the field and feel confident being competent and capable and strong advocates for the people that they serve. And the challenge with that is again, like you said, in that environment, people are fired up, but then they go to their employer, who may or may not be able to sustain the environment that would promote that ongoing output. And so we have people that are able to flourish in that environment anyway, but we have people that will then say, this is not the place for me, or they'll move on to another profession. And so I consider all of those options, or all of those outputs, positive, because if you're in a position where you feel that you're not able to work to your full potential, then please find another place that will suit you. Exactly. If you're able to negotiate the environment that you're in so that you can be satisfied and be productive and still achieve your personal goals, then that's wonderful. Or if you decide that, maybe if I get a different, move into another profession, something that's much more specialized, like nursing or social work or becoming a teacher, then, again, that's, in my book, another win.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's when I think it was Wendy was asking me for a clarification, and just for the record, I because you all know this already, I wanted to let you know what I meant by this. So my wife works for a state agency that helps people with disabilities get to work, these counselors that she supervises are their performance is measured by the number of cases for which their clients have achieved work in the past 90 days. They call them stats. So that's a pretty clear output measure. But of course, an outcome measure would be something like enabling people with disabilities to participate in any aspect of the workforce that gives their lives meaning. Of course, that's not something that's necessarily easily measured. I want to thank all of you for being so thoughtful and introspective. I've learned so much from all of you. It's been a really rich discussion, and I'm happy to turn it back to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking that question, Michael, because he's asking the question that we need to know when we create a certification, which is how do we tell if people did the job? Because we can't necessarily, we can ask them to report if they feel that they have changed their ability to interpret people's intentions, behaviors, and circumstances. But, how do we measure it so that we can be state certified? And that somebody can say, yeah, there's some way of telling whether or not people have done this. And, that's the question that probably is for the next discussion. It's pretty dense and hard to tell. One thing I do want to note, I think that this is really important, and I believe this, and I appreciate, Brandon, you bringing this up again, the notion of something like this needing to be elective. This kind of training can't be mandatory, because you have to take the first step to decide this is what you want to be. And that's why I'm hoping we'll be able to link this type of certification, should it become a real thing, to things like promotability and raises and that type of thing, to incentivize people to participate over and above just making a good choice about your education. And I also really appreciate the last concept Rebecca and Wendy brought up, which is the difference between learning and practice. You know, this is the perpetual problem. It's true, I'm sure, also in the police academy, that, you know, you can learn all sorts of exactly the best practices, ways to do something, and then you're out there in the clutch, and how do you make the best decision when that individual is in front of you? That's another challenge. So measurement, how do you translate really sort of what ultimately probably will be kind of esoteric learning about how you meaningfully take in the presence of another person and are able to make the best decisions for and about them. So I echo what Dr. Johnson said. Again, Michael, thank you for bringing this up. This is really super important. This has been a great conversation and taught us both a lot about where to go for next steps. For next steps, oh, there's 10 people watching now. That's great. 10, hello out there. So the next steps, we're going to offer each of our youth data collectors an opportunity to hold such a discussion at one of their schools. I've been in conversation with several of their schools already about trying to set this up. So that's one next step. October 14th, we're having a fundraiser at the Blue Llama Jazz Club. It may be online. We'll let COVID tell us what we get to do. And we are raising funds because we are paying all of the people that are involved. All 6 of our youth data collectors will be making $500 apiece for their contribution to this effort. This is an important thing. I want everybody to know these kids have been paid for their time and their effort. We also are going to have, of course, a symposium in February 2022, where we will bring in artists and other community members to help flesh out this this certification, which will be, you know, make it a full community contribution. So thank you all very much for coming, all you 10 people online. Thank you. And please don't hesitate to reach out, onelovesymposium@gmail.com if you have any questions. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. Yeah. Yay. Oh my gosh, and it's 12:57. That's perfect. We used the whole time. Good job, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.